Today, Pastor Peter Chin will share the message from Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 4 through 7. I'm Luke, and I will read in Spanish, and Devin will read in English. Hear the word of the Lord. Así dice el Señor de los ejércitos, el Dios de Israel, a todos los que envié al exilio de Jerusalén a Babilonia. Construyan casas y habítenlas, planten huertos y coman de su fruto.
This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into Israel from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce.
Cásense y tengan hijos e hijas. También casen a sus hijos e hijas para que a su vez ellos les den nietos. Multiplíquense allá y no disminuyan. Además, busquen el bienestar de la ciudad a donde los he deportado y pidan al Señor por ella, porque el bienestar de ustedes depende del bienestar de la ciudad.
Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. This is the word of the Lord.
With that, I did want to just share one more word, kind of going on this outside theme about God being outside and our calling out there. And that is that there is oftentimes, I think, an issue that gets in our way when we are going outside. And it's long-standing, and it's something that I think often has tripped up Christians when it comes to how we interact with people outside. And there's this tension. And it's a tension that comes out of our identity as Christians, who we are as Christians. And that tension is this: the tension between our identity as exiles in this world and our identity as people who pursue the good of the world. Because when you go into Scripture, there's proof for both of these kind of identities. That, yeah, we are exiles, foreigners and aliens in this world. The world is not our home. Our citizenship is in heaven. And because of that, we have nothing to do with the world. The world is the world. That's not our home. We're a different people. So that encourages a sense of separation from what's going on all around us. And we read that in 1 Peter 2, 9 through 11, where it says this: "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul." I think this is a conception of the Christian identity that I think many of us are familiar with. We're not of this world. This is not our home. And so we separate ourselves from the way this world happens and what happens in this world because it's not our real identity. It's not our real home. And I think that's a conception of our identity as Christians. But on the other hand, there's another conception, the opposite one, which is no, we're called to be very present and very aware of what's going on and investing ourselves in the good of for the good of the world that we are called into. And we see that in Isaiah 58, where it says this: "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood?" And so here we have a very different conception of who we are. Not separated out and people who are isolated, but instead people who are very much called in to be aware of what's going on and to work for the good of the people who are around us. And so here we have these two identities, these two conceptions of who we are that kind of rub up against each other. They're a little conflicted. And I'm not just making this up. This has been a historical tension in the church for a long time. And some of us have seen that or have been raised in that. How many of us were raised in church environments that said, hey, you're foreigners and aliens in this world. Who cares what happens in this world? Jesus is going to come anyway. He's going to make all things new. So just live holy lives. Let the world deal with whatever the world's going to do. On the other hand, we've had people who actively say, no, we have to absolutely be in the world and doing what the world does and working for the world as well. This is a real tension in our lives, in our church, in our culture, in our society. This is not hypothetical at all. And so we really have to answer this because they take us in two very different directions. If we obey one, then we just see ourselves as different and isolated from the world, and whatever happens to the world, that's the world's business. The other one, we're very involved in it. So which is it? Which are we? Are we exiles called out of this world, or are we workers called into the world to pursue its good? We need to understand this and come to some better way of comprehending this. Jeremiah 29 gives us some really good instructions for this, where it says this. In verse 4, it says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon." And what this does, it establishes the context for the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a book of exile. And that exile was the people of Judah were conquered by King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon in a brutal, brutal conquest where people were just terrible stories of the oppression that happened from the Babylonians to the people of Judah. And not only were they conquered and the city of Jerusalem sacked, they were then uprooted and then brought to Babylon to live there as exiles. And so that's the context into which Jeremiah is giving these prophecies, that the people of Israel are now living in Babylon as exiles. It's not their home at all. Not only is it not their home, as if they're just living somewhere else, it's the land of their oppressors. It's the land of the people who blinded their king. It's the land of the people who uprooted them and took them to a new place. This is not a good thing at all. This is the context of Jeremiah 29. The people of Israel are in exile in Babylon. And yet, in verse 7 of that context of chapter 29, God says this: "Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have called you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." We've often heard that passage, right? Many of us maybe can even recite Jeremiah 29:7, but we divorce it from the context of Jeremiah 29:7. He's not just saying, hey, pursue the good and the peace and prosperity of the neighborhoods that you're in, that you chose to live in. He says, seek the peace and prosperity of the place of exile to which I have carried you, aka Babylon. Seek the peace and prosperity of Babylon, the land of your oppressors, the land of your exile. And so often we read Jeremiah 29 and we don't even recognize that at all. We just think he's saying, oh, be a good neighbor. He's saying, be a good neighbor while you are in exile. That's really what he's saying in this passage. And it's teaching us this incredibly difficult teaching, which is this. According to Jeremiah 29, we are exiles who are called to do good. That's our identity, at least according to Jeremiah 29. He doesn't say in Jeremiah 29, you're not exiles, so go ahead and work in the communities that you're in. Neither does it say that, go ahead and do this work, but you're not exiles. He says both of these things. You are very much exiles, and you are called to do good in the land of exile that you are called. There's not a conflict between these identities, not according to Jeremiah 29. There's a fusion. These are both true. That the identity of the people of Israel is, yes, they were exiles. God's not denying that. But he's also saying, do good at the same time in your identity as an exile. This is not the only place that we see this very clearly. In James 1:27, this is what he says: "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and flawless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress." That's that good, right? Seeking the good of the people around us. And to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Being separate from the world, not being like the world. But he doesn't choose one or the other. He says both. True religion that God looks at and he's pleased by is when we reach out and we care for people who are marginalized and hurt. And we're not like this world. Not either or. We read this in 1 Peter 2, which we read a little bit of, but I stopped at a certain point. It says, "Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul." Separation, right? Exile. We are not of this world. Don't be like this world. But that's not where the passage ends. Verse 12 says this, "Live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us." It's both of these things. Yes, don't be like the world. You are exiles. You are called not to be like the world. The Bible never compromises on that. It never gives us permission to be like the world, but neither does it give us permission to be separated from the concerns of the world. It calls us to do both over and over and over again. In our simplistic theology, we think to choose one or the other. Be liberal, be progressive, or be conservative on this. But the Bible never makes that choice. It says you are both. You are exiles who are called to be separated and holy and also to do good into this world to which you are not a resident or citizen of. And we need to deeply internalize this. We need to deprogram from this mutually exclusive thing, this choice that we've been given over and over, and say, no, we are exiles who do good. That is our identity. If you look at James, Peter, or in the book of Jeremiah. And so I think this is a much different way for us to perceive ourselves. Not as one thing or the other, but both. Exiles who do good. That is who we are. But I think even going further than this idea can give us a better conception of how we do this. Not just a self-conception of our identity, but even a roadmap of what this looks like. Because another way to understand this idea of exiles who do good is this. Exiles who do good are supposed to do that good in an exile kind of way. So let me flesh that out, because it sounds like I'm just making words up here. But what I'm saying is, yes, our identity is that we are exiles who are supposed to be doing good. But what that means, practically speaking, when we go out and do that good should look like our exile. It should still reflect our identity, kind of where we come from and who our God is. And so that's taking this idea a step further, not just that we're doing good, that when we do good, there should be something unique about it. Our good should look like our exile. It should still separate us from the world, even as we do good. It's kind of like, what does that mean? How do we do good in this world that reflects our exilic identity, our identity as God's children? Well, let me give us just a few kind of examples of what this looks like. Doing good in an exile sort of way is knowing that the battle is both physical and spiritual. It's understanding it's both of those things, not just one or the other. We read in James 2 that, yes, doing good is physical. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? And so we should be a people thinking about the physical needs that people have. But in the book of Ephesians, we read this. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. One way that our good is different is that when we do good, we know it's not just a physical thing. We know it's more about just housing and money and equity. All those are very important. There is also spiritual things as well. The enemy is at work. And people can have money. They can have a house, they can be on top of the world and still be dying inside. I spent a little time recently in Northern California, and this is not a knock on Northern California, let me just say this, but I was ministering at a church where people, I think the average salary was probably, the lowest was 6 figures. Just extremely wealthy. But as I was meeting with some of the young people, the incredible amounts of spiritual warfare they were experiencing in their lives, of self-harm, of people thinking terrible things of themselves and others, while they had everything in the palm of their hands, made me realize the battle is not just physical. They had everything that they needed, and yet the enemy was still at work in their lives. And that's a reminder to us, yes, we should be doing good, but that good is not just purely physical, it is spiritual as well. And I love what we did at the Rainier Beach Back to School Bash. We were able to be there to give out, backpacks and to kind of equip kids for school. But we were also praying for people. And there are people who are coming up to our prayer intercessors and saying, backpacks are fine and all this is fine, but I need prayer. They knew that the battle in their lives was simply not material. As important as it was, there was also a spiritual component. That's us. That's how we do good. Is by not just saying that it's a physical thing. There's a spiritual battle is at work all around us. That's what it means to do good in an exile kind of way. Another way we do good is doing good in an exile sort of way is not doing good for any kind of credit or recognition. We live in a very moralistic time. People are trying to do good all around us. This is not the 80s where no one wanted to do good. It was all about me, me, me. This is the 2020s. Everyone wants to be good. Everyone wants to be doing the good thing. You don't have to go very far on social media or YouTube or whatever to see it. But what all of us probably have seen ourselves are people are doing it so that other people will know. It's maybe the main reason why people are doing good. People on YouTube feeding the poor, and in the corner, 20 yards away, is their friend in the bushes, videotaping them so they can be seen doing that good. There is virtue signaling across the board in both progressive and conservative environments of people proclaiming, trumpeting, I know the right things and I say the right things. And that is really the beating heart of morals in our culture right now. But we read this in Matthew chapter 6. When you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what the right hand is doing, so that your giving may be a secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. We don't do good for this world. We do good so that God will see us and that He'll honor us instead. And I've seen churches do this as well. Falling into this habit of doing good so that we can put it out there and say, look at what our church is doing. I understand a little bit of that. We're trying to encourage that. We're trying to get other people to do that as well. But there is a danger there. Our main motivation is not for this world. It's to honor our God in heaven instead. That's another way that we do good in a unique way that is not like this world. We're doing good not for the world's recognition, but for God's. Another way that we do good in a different way is doing good in an exile sort of way is starting with introspection of ourselves, not condemnation of others. Again, think about how we do good in this present age. What are the tools that we use? Is not one of them condemnation? Is it not when someone does something wrong, just jumping on them and calling them out and just destroying them if at all possible? So they never do anything anymore again. It's just really outwardly focused. And I'm guilty of this. I'm not saying just the world. I am part of the world. I do this oftentimes. But what does Psalm 139 teach us? Search me, God. Know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is of any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. This is one of the things that we have to do when we're doing good. The pronouns are me pronouns first. They're never external pronouns. They're never search that guy because they are really bad. And actually, to be honest, in this psalm, it sometimes does that. But the psalmist always curves back and says, no. Search me first. Know me first. And we have gotten out of that practice even as the church. We are starting to fall into the habits of the world of pointing fingers externally when the very first question is, wait, what about me? How am I complicit? Am I doing the right things? Have I done what I'm supposed to? Am I a good reflection of Christ? How am I complicit in the things that are going around in this world? We have to ask those questions first because the spirit of our faith is introspection, not condemnation. It's another way in which we stand apart as we do good. Here's one more, the last one I'll talk about. Doing good in an exile sort of way means always remaining connected to the grace of Jesus Christ. Whatever we do, that it comes out of grace. Let me just kind of point out something that I often am just amazed by. What sets Christianity apart from any other religion? It's not believing God. All religions believe in God, right? It's not even believing in a holy God, because a lot of religions believe in a holy God. Neither is it just a powerful God. Zeus was a powerful God. It's not even just a loving God. There are loving conceptions of God. It's that we believe in a forgiving God. We believe in a God who, even when we did not do right, still forgave us freely. It wasn't about us. That's what set Christianity apart, is grace. None of us are here because we did the right thing. None of us are moral enough. None of us lived up to the standard of holiness that God would have for each of us. All of us are here because God said, I love you anyway. Even if you are a complete failure, even if you kill disciples, I still have a plan for you. Even if you conspire to kill a man's wife so that you could take her for yourself, I still love you. That is the spirit of our faith. That is why we're here. It's because of grace. Now imagine that each one of us comes out of this faith, a faith of grace and forgiveness, and we go out in the world and we go out in the spirit of condemnation. And we say, you messed up, man, I don't want to ever talk to you again. You did this, you screwed up, you should never work in public ever again. What does that say to the world when we are people who are only here by grace, but they can't hear grace in our words? And they can't see grace in our actions. Do you see the conflict there? That we are a people of grace who do not act it out? It's not visible in anything that we do? And you see the problem when we go out in this world, but we are not founded in grace and we're not proclaiming grace in what we do. This is one of the ways that we do good in an exile way. When we do good, people should hear the grace of Jesus Christ. Yes. They should see people who are willing to forgive in the same way we've been forgiven. And it'd be wrong of us as the people of the gospel to do anything different. And so here we have all these different ways that we can do this. And maybe just one way that we can kind of sum it up is this. Doing good in an exile way should point people to the greatest good there is, and that is to Jesus. That's what our good is. It's great to do good for our communities and build them up. That's not bad, but exile good points to our exile. Exile good points to our identity. Whenever we do good, we're proclaiming something else. Not, hey, we're just like the world. We are still proclaiming, hey, we're not like the world. Hey, look to the one who called me to do this good, the greatest good you will ever find, and that is Jesus. That is our identity. That is our way. And it might be hard for us even now to kind of think, okay, what does that look like? There are people who are doing this work. There are exiles who are doing good in an exile sort of way, and I want to call them out so we can kind of look at their example. One person is our brother Sean Good, who used to be the executive director of Choose 180, which gave kind of new options and choices for kids who were heading down the wrong path. So they could kind of have a new path outside of the criminal legal justice system, the school to prison pipeline. And this is what he said in an article with Real Change magazine. Real Change News. He says this: for me, it all starts with grace and the transformative power of grace. There's something we say within the organization that grace, selectively applied, is favoritism, which means that you have to extend the same grace to the people that is convenient to you as you do to the people it's inconvenient to extend that grace to. Otherwise, we end up playing favorites, which is what the criminal legal system often does. Grace invites people on a journey to heal, whereas guilt only creates a mechanism at best for people to see where they caused harm. Sean is doing good, but can't you hear the gospel in it? You just scratch the surface and it's like Jesus is right there underneath it all. And that's what we're talking about, this good in an exile way. It's happening. Let me give you another powerful example that came out of the shooting that happened a few weeks ago. And that's the words of Marty Jackson, who's the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club, who's doing this amazing work of building community in our neighborhood. They had a meeting, a conference to kind of talk about what happened. And I just want to call out some of the things that Marty Jackson shared. So let's turn our attention to the screen.
It was an emotional return to the Rainier Beach Safeway for the Boys and Girls Club of King County team that was present during a shooting that wounded 5 people nearly 2 weeks ago. 2 of the team members were wounded during the incident, but that is not deterring the group from wanting to restart their weekly community events.
These guys told me they're ready to come back out and fight. They've shared with me, yes, we've taken a hit, we've taken a blow, and I have to say this. when I sat with the team yesterday and learned about what all transpired in this parking lot that night. I was so proud because even though the leader of this team was shot, he was running around trying to see who he could help.
Jackson said she wished the people responsible for the shooting had sought help.
I wish for whatever it is you're hurting for, that we could have intervened, that we could have hugged you, that we could have loved on you, that we could have given you something. I wish we could have known whatever it is you're going through that caused you to spray this whole parking lot and not have any regard for these people behind me and other people in the space. I hope that you hear me today and know that we love you and we care about you. We need you to be healed.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what we're talking about. This is what it means to do good, great good, but to do it in a way where you don't have to scratch very hard at all to hear grace, to hear the gospel, to hear this different identity that we have as Christians, that we have these elders, these mentors who are doing this amazing work. And so I hope that I want to see this as a way for me to engage, and for all of us as well. Yes, that we are exiles. Our citizenship is in heaven. We are foreigners and exiles in this world who are called to do good. And the good that we do should proclaim the greatest good that we have in our lives, who is Jesus Christ. And I encourage us to kind of let that sink in. At the moment you step outside those doors, you might even say to yourself, I'm an exile, but I'm called to do good. What would our communities look like if we all took that seriously? Can you just imagine? If everywhere we went, people saw Marty Jacksons and Sean Goods in schools and in neighborhoods and workplaces and whatever it might be. People who understood these things. Let's do this. Let's take this identity seriously of being exiles who do good at the same time.